Kathy are here, and we're just really excited to have Anthony here today to share with us about our native plants. So Anthony came to Montana as the land steward coordinator. He just told me that too. For the Audubon Center, and he was there, and now he's at Two Moon Park as the caretaker. Thank you. I have a very short-term memory, and that doesn't serve me well. So anyway, Anthony is here, and we're just, thank you so much, Anthony, for coming and sharing with us. This is a mission that's really important to Wild Birds Unlimited for many, many reasons. So we're just really excited that you're here to share with us.
Thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. How's it going? So before I start, I just kind of want to gauge the knowledge and understanding of the audience. So raise your hands if you consider yourself a beginning gardener. You've maybe got a vegetable patch with some flowers, but that's about it. Okay, so beginners. All right. We'll say you're an experienced gardener now. You've got a whole variety of plants, and you're starting to learn the bugs in your garden. All right. Cool. So we got a good spectrum. Perfect. All right. So this presentation, I based it on a program called Gardening for Wildlife, which kind of helped list out some standards that I've found helped me garden better using my native plants and created really beautiful gardens that were super beneficial to all the little creatures that are around. So, as Heather kind of touched on before, a little bit about me. I came to Montana with the Montana Conservation Corps, who placed me at the Montana Audubon Center. I was there for a little over 3 years. I did most of the landscaping and gardening there. And most recently, I became the caretaker of Two Moon Park for Yellowstone County. All right, so within the first 3 months at the Audubon Center, they became certified as a wildlife habitat for their gardens. I'd only been here 3 months, so I had no idea what that meant, but being my title, being the kind of landscaper there, I needed to know because I had to upkeep these gardens in order to make sure we accurately represented that certificate that we got. And I think I did okay. So here are some pictures of the gardens that are around the Audubon Center. So if you are inspired after this presentation, I highly recommend you go take a walk around the building there. A lot of those gardens are still very beautiful and can help give you ideas and inspirations for what to do. So this picture here, this is my pollinator garden. It's got at least 6 different types of wildflowers there. Over here is my bush and tree garden. I have water birches there, sumacs, cottonwood trees with bird feeders there. So there's lots you can do for your garden spaces that help make them happy for wildlife, including having nice edible berries. There's a gooseberry there. Buffalo berries are also great. Sumac berries. There's so many things you guys can grow in your gardens. And then more pollinator gardens. Lots of flowers, lots of color, lots of great things that are easy to grow and locally available. Excuse me, I'll take a little sip of water. All right. So as I mentioned before, I kind of based a lot of my gardening off of what it takes to become a certified wildlife habitat. If you were to go to this website, it would take you to the National Wildlife Federation's website, and they're the ones that run this program. On this website, there will be this checklist. This checklist, I will blow it up in the next slide, but it gives you 5 factors that you can do pretty easily in your own gardens or your landscape spaces to make these areas a little more wildlife friendly. All right. So here are the 5 factors: food, water, cover, places to raise young, and sustainable practices. So we're going to go through these one at a time. We'll kind of flesh them out a little more in detail. Give you some fun native plants and things that you can do to help accomplish each of these 5 factors. All right, food. So when I think of food for my garden spaces, I think of it as having some sort of native plant varieties around that'll provide the food for the wildlife. You don't have to be solely reliant on native plants. Supplementary feeders are also great. It'll also check off that box on the checklist. And Wild Birds Unlimited is a fantastic place to get all the supplemental feed that you need for your garden spaces. All right, so I have here examples of flowering native plants. They include blue flaxes, roses, bee balms, your milkweeds, of course, coneflowers, primroses, rubber rabbit brush. Those plants are the ones that I kind of exclusively worked with at the Audubon Center, and I have them listed here in chronological order for when they flower. So the timing of the flowering of your natives is very important when you're trying to provide food, because they don't all flower at the same time. So if you can spread out your flowering, so each month of the growing season, you've maybe got something new that's flowering, you're still providing that food source. So your blue flaxes, first thing in the spring. I had beautiful carpets of blue, but they didn't last that long. And if that was the only thing I had planted in my garden space, the rest of the growing season, my landscape's rather empty as far as food goes. But if I have this list like I have here, I have flowering all year long. This food is provided, and that food is the nectar, the pollen, the seeds that come off once those flowers are pollinated. All of that are great food sources. Another great food source is any sort of, say, bush or tree that produces an edible fruit. So your gooseberries are great, choke cherries, sumac is wonderful, buffalo berry. All these bushes are found locally around. You can go to any of your natural areas, and they typically do pretty well in our garden and yard spaces. Grapefruits, the buffalo berry is a great example because that berry, sorry, I'm a little nervous shaking them out. The buffalo berry is the best tasting berry in the winter. For some reason, when the cold shock happens, those plants pump all the sugar they have left into those little red berries. And they're delicious to us, and they're typically one of the last berries kind of still on the plants out in nature when we go into winter. So great food source later on, something awesome you can provide for the animals in and around your landscape. All right, and as I said before, supplemental feeders. They're fantastic. If you need ideas or inspiration, just look around. They're all over us here. All right, some more examples of kind of the food sources. Supplemental feeders, of course, but the main one I want to focus on is the collage of flowers there. So not only is the timing of the flowering important, so spring through fall, it's also important to have variety in the colors and the shapes of your flowers. So I know some people, I've seen some very beautiful purple gardens. I've seen folks who just love one particular color, and that's great. But if you're trying to garden for wildlife per se, you will need to have some variety. All the insects and creatures that are coming to visit these flowers all see a different spectrum of light, or a different spectrum of light is what attracts them. So if you can have your purples and your oranges and your whites and your yellows, get as many colors as you can, you're increasing the amount of insects or bugs, amount of insects and birds who want to come to your garden space and get food there because they see what they want and they're able to access it. Another important thing as far as flowers go, the shape of them is very important. Some of them are very long and tubular, like say a primrose. Others can be kind of like short and blunt, like a sunflower. So all the different animals that are out there have different ways of eating. So hummingbirds, as we know, very long tongue. They want to reach back into something like say a primrose flower and get the nectar that's stored there. While a bumblebee is gonna have a hard time getting into that long tube. So a sunflower is perfect because they can just crash land on it, run around, get covered in pollen, and then cap. So variety of color is great, variety of size and shape is wonderful, and then just try to have as many flowers as you can all year long. All right, water. All animals need water to survive. Some need it for bathing and breeding as well. All right, so when I'm thinking for my garden spaces, my idea is I just want to have water locally. So if you live in a place that is really close to the river, a ditch, Lake Elmo, there's an open body of water nearby, you're probably okay as far as water goes for where you live. But say you're out in the boonies and it's a dry place, you're probably gonna wanna provide some sort of water source. So bird baths, fantastic and easy to do. I would recommend though, keeping them clean. We did have that outbreak of bird flu coming around, and if you're able to keep these as clean as possible, you're going to help stop the spread of whatever kind of contagion may be going around. A fun option, if you're feeling really creative and ambitious, is this little ground pond that I found here. So that is fantastic for all the little critters who can't fly or climb up to get into a bird bath. Things like frogs and the salamanders that we have out here are definitely going to utilize this ground source of water to breed and to lay their eggs safely. But unfortunately though, you're also going to provide a haven for mosquitoes. So kind of got to balance what works best for your landscape, what you want, but it's a fun option and idea if you're feeling like you want to have a variety of water sources. This is a great idea. I don't know why I never thought of it, but I was Googling around and I found something called a bee bath, which seems to be pretty simple to make. So bird baths, typically very slippery sides. They don't really have a lot of places for this small insect to grip and climb out if they fall in. So just simply by putting some rocks or a stick maybe into your bird baths gives whatever little creature falls in a place to climb out, dry off, and then fly away and safely get a drink without the fear of drowning. So, super simple, easy way to do this. I thought it was very cute. We're definitely going to utilize that some. All right, so the third factor is cover. So wildlife needs places to take shelter from bad weather and places to hide from predators or to hunt for prey. So when I'm thinking of cover for my garden areas, I try to think of two types: elevated cover and ground cover. Elevated cover is typically any sort of plant or structure that is 4 to 5 feet tall, taller if possible, and also kind of spreads out. Ground cover is anything kind of below that 4-foot mark that kind of creates like a little thicket or a low shrub to where if you were to stand above it and look down directly into it, you're gonna have a hard time seeing the ground underneath. So I qualify that as good ground cover. Good examples of cover, wooded areas. You've got a cluster of decent sized trees growing close together, fantastic. Brush piles and mulch piles, while they might look kind of funky out in your yard space, they're great for all the little ground critters because they can run up and into those brush and mulch piles pretty easily, take cover, and be nice and safe. Thinking of plants, ground covering plants, low growing junipers are fantastic. I've got a picture of one later on. Bunch grasses, a lot of our native bunch grasses are also great. They can get nice and big and wide, and they have a bunch of leaf material that falls over. Low bushes, your Oregon grapes, some of your sumacs are also good. Little buffalo berries, just anything small, shrubby, kind of below your waist, blocks the ground. Wonderful ground cover. Your elevated cover, I like to think of big pine trees, especially in the winter. They have all their needles on. They're a great place to take refuge, especially on a day like today. Climbing vines are also good. So we have wonderful native clematis that grows pretty well. There's lots of riverbank grape down by Norm's Island. Those are great cover because they also connect the two pieces from elevated to ground. So things that want to get up are able to access it without being too exposed. Things that want to come down have that access as well. Sagebrush I like too. Lots of western sage out here. They can be your good ground or elevated cover. They can get big. And then a fun one is your bird, bat, and bug boxes or hotels. They're quick and easy to make and buy, and they go up well, and they look and work wonderful. So here's some pictures from the Audubon Center, kind of show the different types of cover that I have. So this picture here is my pollinator garden that was there. And all of the flowering plants that you can see, there's milkweed, coreopsis, there's some coneflower, a couple other varieties there. They're all growing nice and close together, kind of below that waist marker I was talking about. So that's excellent ground cover. And then emerging from all of those flowering plants is this tall chokecherry tree. So it's going to be above the rest of the garden for the entirety of that garden's existence, and serves as the elevated cover. So if something were to want to fly and take cover quickly, it can get into that chokecherry and be safe. While everything on the ground is nice and protected with all the flowering plants. Over here, this is that wonderful low-growing juniper I was talking about. This thing is huge. I think it's like 6 by 8 feet wide, and it is impermeable going down to the dirt. It is just a thicket, and wonderful for any little critter that's stuck out here that needs to jump in real quick. It has that access. And then adjacent to it, I have a bunch of big patches of sunflowers and a rubber rabbit brush. They grow very tall, they've got lots of leaves, and they're wide, and they're serving as that elevated cover that I'm looking for in my garden spaces. All right, the fourth factor, places to raise young. So wildlife need resources to reproduce and to protect and nourish their young. So, I mentioned it before, but I'll say it again. The bird, bug, and bat box hotels are fantastic as far as providing a place for them to raise their young. And then the bug boxes and hotels are kind of fun to make. Like this picture here, that is literally just a bunch of sticks, pine cones, and little bundles of grass that somebody just kind of put together into that little box and nailed it to the fence. The bugs love it, so they'll go in there, they'll lay their eggs, they'll maybe eat some of the material there. It's a little bit of a food source. Super fun and simple to do. Yep, there's a bat box, a little birdhouse. Fantastic. Your natural elements. So for your garden spaces, I like mature trees. Something big, tall and leafy, deciduous, evergreen, something like that in your garden or around your landscape space. It's fantastic as far as a place for things to nest, to hide. Standing dead trees, I would say, are even better. If you can get a standing dead tree on your property that's not going to fall on anything that you care about, leave it up for as long as you can. Oftentimes those things are just swarming with insects that are slowly breaking down the tree, and that brings birds in who are going to try to get at the food source. Oftentimes the cavities are made in the tree, so now you've got a nesting spot for something. So standing dead trees are phenomenal for wildlife, and I highly recommend if you can stand it and it's in your space, just leave it as long as you can. Wooded areas are also great. Cluster of trees. Your brush piles are also good, especially for some of your ground dwelling creatures. So if you got piles of logs or branches such that you could kind of put in a spot in your space and forget about it, all the little ground dwelling creatures will definitely thank you for it. Ooh, and then this is the fun part. So host plants for specific insects or birds. So if you are a naturalist of sorts and you're looking out in your garden space and you're like, I wish I could see whatever creature you want. Butterflies, moths, birds. It is worthwhile to go and give a little Google search on that particular creature and see if there's a particular plant that it likes, that it's attracted to. So the main examples that I found out here for Yellowstone County, milkweed and monarch butterflies, so they are just in tandem together. A new one for me that I did not know before coming here was the tiger swallowtail butterflies, those big yellow ones that we always see in abundance, and cottonwoods. That's their host plant. They love cottonwood trees. And then my latest one that I think is super cool is the primroses and the hummingbird moths. Those are some of the coolest bugs that I had never seen before coming out here. There you are. Wow. All right, let's see. Oh no. Oh, I'm so sad I lost my slide. Okay, so I'll just go in depth and pretend it was there. So the reason that these host plants are super important for varieties of insects or bugs or birds is that those insects are solely dependent on those particular plants. The milkweed is an absolute necessity for monarchs. Those butterflies won't lay their eggs anywhere else. Those caterpillars will solely eat the milkweed because they need that sap that comes from the milkweed into their systems because it makes them toxic to birds. So it makes them inedible and protects them from predation. So without the milkweed, this caterpillar either A, won't be born, the eggs will never be laid, or it is just a yummy snack for any bird that comes by because it's not loaded up with the toxin from the milkweed. Another great one is that hummingbird moth, which I wish I had a picture of. I had a great one. but I definitely recommend Googling it and seeing what a hummingbird moth is, because they're big. They're about yay big, and they fly around just like a hummingbird. And they're looking for specific plants called the primroses. There's a whole variety in Yellowstone County. There's tall evening primroses, there's big fruit primroses. Those are just the quick and easy ones that I can remember, but there's a whole bunch that just grow on the rims right here. The trick about those is they only really bloom kind of like late evenings or at night. So they are looking for a nighttime pollinator to come through. And that's where the hummingbird moth comes in. And that's their main food source. They're looking for those primrose flowers. They have a long tube that has a bunch of nectar. That hummingbird moth's got a long tongue that can reach it. So if you want to see more hummingbird moths, have more primroses in your garden. So these kind of things go hand in hand. As I mentioned before, if there's something you're dying to see in your garden space, see what kind of plant they like. All right, we're already here. Probably the most difficult point as far as gardening for wildlife is the sustainable practices aspect of it. So maintain your yard or your garden in as natural a way to ensure your soil, air, and water are as safe, healthy, and clean as possible. So when I'm thinking about this sort of stuff, I'm trying to limit the amount of chemicals that I'm putting into these spaces. I know weeds are tenacious. Some of them are a pain in the butt to hand pull, and if you gotta spray, you gotta spray. But I would highly recommend being as minimal as you can, putting in chemical herbicide into your space. Use mulch if possible. That's a great way to deter weeds. Hand pull as much as you can. Spray when necessary. But then I also must plug that if you have a great garden space that is full of good native plants, they don't even have to be native, as long as they're not invasive, I'm happy. But they're strong and healthy in your space, you have exponentially increased your area's resiliency of blocking out native species from coming in. You've taken up all the available space from all these good plants, leaving nowhere for the bad weeds to come in. Same kind of goes for your fertilizer use. It's okay to kind of spruce up your gardens every now and again. They'll lack nutrients after a while, but if you can put a compost down or a compost tea, that would almost be preferable. Because sometimes when you're putting in the chemical fertilizers, they are solely focused on particular nutrients that plants will need. They definitely will need, but it can almost be done to an extreme, where how many nutrients you have in there could make other ones completely unavailable to the plants in your garden. So if you can gently fertilize your garden, that would be great. Composting and using compost teas are also fantastic. Lots of stores in town sell this sort of product. It's a great way to kind of limit the chemicals that go into your space. Speaking of limiting things, your water use. I know it's snowing outside, but we kind of live in an arid place. If you are able to plant local varieties of plants that are adapted to this area, you're gonna save a whole bunch on water. The first maybe year or two of your baby plants growing in your garden, they might need a little extra water, but once they get established, you can just go to bed and not even have to worry about having to soak it or water anymore. Great examples of these sort of plants, your blanket flowers are fantastic. Coneflower varieties, there's so many pretty ones out there, and they do great here. They plant them on the side of the highway just to hold the erosion. That's a rough spot to be planted. They can definitely do well in your yards. Cactuses, sagebrush, rubber rabbit brush, and junipers, all of these super drought tolerant. There's plenty more that I haven't listed, but any sort of kind of local plant that you would see on a hike, if you can adapt it to your garden space, you're in good. Running for limiting your water. Conserving water in any way you can as well, not just with the drought tolerant plants, but if you wanted to maybe get a rain barrel or two, those are nice. Drip irrigate if possible. It may be a little labor intensive, but then you're not overly soaking your landscape and you're just kind of targeting the areas that need the water. And then putting mulch in and around your garden spaces. Cannot recommend this enough. In the deep, hot part of summer, if you have any bit of soil that's exposed to the dry air, it's just gonna wick water out of your soil. slowly drying out what the plants are trying to hold on to and conserve. But if you put some mulch down, you'll keep it nice and cool. That water will stay in there longer and be more available. And then also the roots and all the little microorganisms that are in your soil are gonna be happier too, because they're not gonna be kind of left baking in that top 2 inches that's just exposed there. All right, these last 2 points are the kind of tricky ones to convince people to do, but I highly recommend it if you can. Leave your gardens messy going into winter. You can stand to look at just kind of what's left over from the growing season. All the little critters will thank you. Let me quick drink first. Okay, so you have all these insects that are now kind of in the fall. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do for winter. And for the most part, they are going to lay their eggs in all of the duff and leaf litter left over in your garden. They'll be under all the sticks, all the branches, anything that's laying on the ground. All your flowers will have big stems with like the empty flower head on top. There are insects that'll go in and drill a hole in those stems and lay their eggs and make little cocoons and all these things. So if you are getting antsy in the fall and you gotta clean up, you cut and remove all the leaves, stems, whatever biomass is left over in your garden and take it away. You're removing all those eggs. You're removing everyone who's kind of tucked in there for the winter and just relocating them to who knows where. And then come spring, you're probably not gonna have much that's gonna emerge from your little garden area. Everything's kind of been tossed aside. And then with that, going into spring, kind of like where we are now, clean up as late as possible. Yesterday was very tempting for me to not do anything because it was nice and warm, but I'm glad I didn't because of what we have today. So on the hike I went on yesterday, I saw tons of little bugs and things starting to emerge. There were spiders and such. They were having a great time in the warmth, but I wonder where they are now because it's cold out. So if you can leave all those leaves and branches and stems of the flowers and such, as long as possible into the spring, maybe into late April, we'll probably get more snow, but as late as possible, you're giving all these creatures a chance to hide and survive the sort of weather that can kind of come and go. So that's more or less my talk. Here are those 5 factors listed again. So they're really easy to follow. I've brought some pamphlets that talk about all these things more in depth you can take home. I only kind of talked about things in this program that I found applicable, that I like to use in my gardens. There's so much more that you can do. So if you'd like to read some, please take whatever you would like. And also, I brought a gift. And I have a bunch of little native plant seeds that I've been storing, and now is kind of the perfect time to get them out into the dirt, because they need some cold shock in order for them to grow. So if you'd like to stick around and talk, we can talk about all the native plants, and I can give you guys some to take home. All right.
I did want to point out that the NWF, which is what he's based pretty much everything on today, well, other than his background, but and on some of our handouts, they have a native plant finder, so you can put in your zip code and you'll come up with a list, and you can create your own personalized list in there. It's pretty cool.
Is that on their website?
It's
Yeah.
brand new, probably about a year old, from Doug Ptolemy.
Yeah, all
worked
right.
with them. Yeah.
That's perfect. What was that again?
The NWF.org. So it's called the Native Plant Finder.
Native plant.
And so you can zero in on the number of, like you mentioned, the cottonwoods, which I love cottonwoods because around here that's the most attractive to the most amount of bugs. And chickadees need 6,000 caterpillars per brood of babies, so
Wow.
we love our bugs and we love our plants.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's another reason why you don't wanna do all the designer shrubs, because then what are you gonna do for, what insects are gonna eat all of those designer shrubs, and how are we gonna raise all the baby birds? Anyway.
Good. So, I went through a lot there. Are there any questions? Yes, sir. I like your hat.
Thanks. Can I come down to Two Moon and dig up
Oh.
native plants?
Oh, that's a good
That's a good
rephrase
question.
it. Where do you go to get
If you care, leave it there.
Where do I
native
go?
plants?
So a lot of what I've started with was from the Audubon Center. There was already a population of stuff there that I could get. And then I've kind of transplanted some of those around and made other garden beds. I think you can kind of go to any state land per se. Patrick's got a help in the back.
Yeah,
so
go
behind
ahead.
you.
Once you start getting into like native planting, you find that we really like to get rid of our seeds really quickly because they are prolific. So once you start tapping into native plant communities, Blake Nursery is one place that does carry native plants in the city. I recommend Prairie Moon Nursery. It's another place where you can put in your zip code and it will tell you kind of the plants are native to your species. But getting in, connecting in with other folks who are doing native plant work in your area is a great way to find places because we're generous. We like to give our seeds to people. We have just started the native, an extension of the Native Plant Society again here in Billings and surrounding counties. So that will be a network of folks you might want to consider reaching out to who have plants. Because going on to like, it's hard to like, you know, you want to take something off a piece of public land, but it's thriving there. And there's so much encroachment happening right now into our native spaces that it's really hard to justify like taking something and then maybe it has like a 30% chance of surviving in your yard when it was doing really fine in that public park. Yeah, fine folks.
Is there a native seed at the library?
So if you were unaware, this is a plug for a whole other program, but the Billings Community Seed Library is a cabinet that exists in the downtown public library, second floor in the Montana room. And right now it is chock full of any sort of garden variety seed that you would like. And I try to put some of the natives that I collect, so there will be some within that cabinet.
Are
That's
they
another good resource.
in the cabinet, are they marked as native?
Yep, there's a whole separate category that says like natives and flowers, there's vegetables and such. But yeah, as Patrick said, definitely find a native plant friend. If you see me in the fall or late summer, I'll be throwing seeds at you because I'll be drowning in them. Hopefully that answered your question.
Great.
Yes.
Oh, I actually was just gonna, I went to the seed catalog. It was actually really neat. There's mostly, I saw a lot of like packaged seeds, so there's also going to be a lot of space for people to donate their seeds, and I'm really hoping to look forward to seeing that seed catalog next year, because I want to be able to contribute seeds that I get.
Yes. Did you come to the seed swap?
No.
Yes, any other questions? Yes.
So, do you always start your seeds, or do you just, grow them out too?
A little bit of both. So most of the native plants that I've mentioned here today require some sort of cold shock to the actual seeds in order to get them to grow. So if you were to plant them in, say, May, when we're really not getting too much colder, you're probably not going to have a lot of germination. So what I try to do is plant the seeds in the fall, typically late October, before the first kind of cold bout starts coming in, and then just cross my fingers and hope for the best. And I've had good success. I had a lot of stuff come up. With planting in the fall, though, you have to take into account that little creatures are foraging, so they might find the seeds that you plant, so you may want to overplant a little bit just to ensure. But you could start them now if you wanted. Put them in the refrigerator a couple weeks to 30 days, and then you could put them in a pot and put them outside. I also know another gentleman who puts his seeds in pots and just leaves them outside all winter long, and then around this time or a little bit later, he'll take that tray then and put it in his greenhouse, and stuff will emerge from that. They just need that cold shock, that cold thaw that kind of happens. Yes.
Another question. So in my garden, before I got into really native things, I have a lot of the blue purple things that are not native, like Russian sage and Russian thistle and veronica. Oh my gosh, and the bugs just love them. I mean, they're just covered in bugs, and they last a long time. Is that okay?
I would say that's okay. I'd say the only thing with the Russian sage is just good luck keeping it contained where you
Yeah.
have it, because those things love to run and
Yeah,
escape.
they do.
But yeah, say any sort of good food, flowering plants is wonderful as long as it's not one of the invasive species that we have out there. So like a leafy spurge or a knapweed of sorts, like great flowers and such, but they're gonna end up taking over and cause more damage than the food they're gonna provide. There's a balance to be met in everything. Yes.
So where's it good to get, compost and mulch? Cause a lot of the stores around here may have those products, some of them say organic and that, but you don't know exactly what chemicals are in some of these
Yeah,
things.
they're using.
Where's a good source for that?
Alright, Patrick, no,
Gosh, there are some mulching companies in and around town.
like Rocky Mountain Compost.
Rocky Mountain Compost is the one I was thinking of, yeah.
They're good.
They're kinda like a mulching co-op. You give them their scraps and at the end of every 3 months or so, they give you back mulch. So,
I would trust some of the stuff that Canyon Creek's got. I could say Ann's pretty good. I think they've got some compost tea mix as well, where it's like a concentrate that you can dilute and then water your garden with that. No one else is really coming to mind. I'll maybe sell my buddy here. My buddy is trying to make his own compost tea and such, so if you're interested, I can give you his name and contact, 'cause he's making little batches and testing them out himself.
So I know the Harvest Tech, they have different kinds of compost because of the marijuana growers and that, which is supposed to be very rich. But I'm not sure,
Who was
their
this, the
recommend-
Harvest Tech?
Harvest Tech? You never heard of
Never
Harvest
heard
Tech?
that.
Yeah, they, sell just all sorts of gardening supplies and pots and stuff like that, and, fertilizer and,
Drip irrigation systems.
irrigation systems, yeah.
Okay.
They're down by the Paws and Claws dog
Yeah,
park or something.
seafood guys.
Seafood guy, they're near the seafood guys, yeah.
Okay.
Uh,
I'll stop in and check that out.
West End.
Oh, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Quite naive. What about yucca plants? Are they an invasive or, because I am considering putting them somewhere, but what if they just take off?
You'd have to call me if they took off.
Okay.
Yeah. They're a great native.
Okay.
They're fantastic. They're the host plant for the yucca moth, which is reliant on that. They're very slow growing. They produce a lot of seeds, but they don't typically take over the site per se. And then also more fun facts. Almost that entire plant is edible. You see the white flowers on the yucca plant, you can safely pick them off and eat it. It tastes like sweet lettuce. The fleshy stalk that the flowers are on, it's like asparagus. You can cut it up and steam it. And then if you're real ambitious, you can dig up the root, and it's just like a giant potato.
Oh my God. And that would be true in Stillwater County as well as Yellowstone.
Yep, she's saying they're kind of one and the same, like along this river corridor.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So you mentioned, cactus. How do you get cactus? I mean,
How do I get cactus?
yeah, I mean,
Like the prickly
you
pear.
dig it up or you don't really get cactus seeds, do you?
I mean, you could with some of the fruit, but you have to be the first to find the fruit because it's a pretty coveted food resource for lots of creatures. But oftentimes, if you see a cactus out there that's got multi-segmented parts, be gentle with it, but you could take apart one of the petals and leaves, and that part itself has the ability to kind of root again. So you could stick it in dirt similar to where you found it, and it has the potential to sprout some roots.
Oh, I'm gonna get some of those cranberry cylinder.
What else?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nanking cherry, is it okay?
It's not on the invasive species list, so I would say it's okay. And then being it's a cherry tree, I'm assuming it produces a fruit of
I
some
need
sort.
delicious little berries.
And that's fantastic. I would say that's a great food source that I'm sure brings all of the birds to your yard.
If I don't get them first.
You're out there. Good. Anything else? Yes.
I went to a talk, by Scott, who does the Arboretum food, and he mentioned, mock orange, and he called it a native. Is that a native around here? Or was that, I mean, I have it, it comes up in my garden every year, and I cut it back because I didn't think it was something that I wanted. But
But he says it's a native.
And he says it's mock orange Louisi, which is like Lewis and Clark. So I thought, well,
Yeah, it's a native.
Yeah.
it is a native, huh? So I should just let that one start growing. Instead of chopping it out every time.
Maybe if it's coming back tenacious, it might take over your whole yard.
I don't think so.
You don't think?
No,
All
I
right.
don't think so.
Then it should be a good one to grow.
A real mock orange has delicious smelling, white blossoms.
Yeah.
What kind of feeder?
But I've always chopped this back before it could blossom, because I just thought it was like a weedy thing.
I'll get you these.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you listening to me.